Great, I'm live. I'm back. So hopefully you guys can find me right now. There's no one watching this, so but there will be, I'm sure. So I'll just keep answering questions, and hopefully people will come aboard, and David Raiklen will find this, and we'll keep going for a few more minutes. So yes, there's 2 people watching. Okay, thank you. Some of you tell your friends I'm live online. But I don't have the questions on the right, so I'll just have to kind of vamp for a minute or 2 until someone asks questions and wants to know stuff. You know, the reason I love science is to use metaphor and use analogy and so forth. And if you talk about Trump, suddenly you're in a polarized conversation. But if you talk about authoritarianism in the future, if you take it into the science fiction realm, you don't polarize people, you don't divide people. Instead, what you get is a conversation, an intellectual conversation that's not as heated. It bothers me with discourse that people are now so insulting to each other and so disrespectful to each other. I don't need people to agree with me. I don't need people to love what I love or agree with my opinions. It's fine if they don't. What I do care about is that people reach out with compassion and empathy. I care about no one being disrespected. I care about people having a roof over their head and food and medical care and hope for the future and for their kids' future. These are things that matter to me. I think I'm very strongly against war, because war is so devastating. It has such chaos around it. And so anything that finds an alternative, it's fascinating to be working with Lord Peter Hain on the feature that we're doing with him. He's in the House of Lords, and he's very much a peace activist. And to talk to him and say, well, he was part of the peace accords, the Irish peace accords. He was a big part of the anti-apartheid movement. And so I talked to him about, well, how do you find alternatives to war? And that's what I'm writing about in Great Solar War, the third Space Command's 2-hour story. And it's great that that he's advising. Oh, yay! Okay. Sad to see this nuance is gone. Oh, back. Welcome to live chat. Remember to guard your privacy and abide by our community guidelines. Okay, sure. I don't have to learn more on that. But thanks, guys. So yeah, hopefully people will find me again. We had a lot of people watching, and now we have fewer. But you guys are the cream of the crop, and you're also the most intelligent and resourceful of my fans. So thank you. If we're having trouble with it, we'll just do our best. We'll talk for a few more minutes, and then we'll fold up our tent. But we seem to be back. It looks like I'm online. Long time no see. Thank you, Mark. So what I was saying is basically, I love science fiction. I'm so glad that we have so many different shows now, so many different possibilities. Most people who make TV and film are not trying to say anything. Really, they're not. And so you have to seek out the ones who are saying something meaningful, who are trying to use this incredibly powerful medium for change in the world. And, and that's okay. We have a lot of things we can look at now. Are there sci-fi anime shows and movies you enjoy? I haven't gotten hugely into anime. When they came out recently with Ghost in the Shell, I actually watched the original animated film and liked it very much more than the live action movie. But anime is so vast, and again, the challenge I have is I wake up in the morning and then I go to bed at night, eventually, and I have only a few hours each day to create the books, the TV shows, the movies, the podcasts, all this stuff that I'm doing. And so if I'm watching a TV show or reading a book, or reading a comic or a graphic novel, it's either something that interests me or that I'm researching. Like, for instance, I'm reading Howard Zinn, Just War. It's a speech he gave about alternatives to war. He wrote A People's History of the United States. I just got a hold of the first edition of Player Piano. This is Kurt Vonnegut's first novel. I'm going to read that because I never read it, and I'm a huge Vonnegut fan. And this is actually one of the prizes in the Space Command Spacesuit Contest. If you haven't checked out the Spacesuit Contest, I have a video on it, and you can find out the rules in it and the designs on the Space Command movie sci-fi.com. And what you make your own spacesuit. You make spacesuits and send them to us, and we put them in Space Command. And amongst the prizes are tickets to the Space Command premiere and the Space Command convention, and also runners-up each get 5 vintage science fiction novels like this one, classic science fiction books from the 50s and 60s and the 70s by Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, Arthur C. Clarke, John Wyndham, on and on. It's terrific. And so I've been buying up these books off eBay, and some of them will be signed. So, for instance, I have signed editions from Harlan Ellison and so forth. And it's quite a contest. Let's see. Hope you don't mind me asking again, but would you mind talking about your work for animation? Sure. Michael Reeves, my dear friend Michael Reeves, was a protege of the great Theodore Sturgeon, who had been a writer on Star Trek and was a great science fiction a legend writer in novels and short stories as well. And Ted was my mentor too when I was a teenager. And Michael and I became fast friends. And Michael was writing for animation, and I wanted to get into TV. I was writing The Twilight Zone Companion at that point. I was in my early 20s. And Michael said, "Hey, you want to write for Space Stars," which was a show with Space Ghost, where he was writing all of them. And I said, sure. So we wrote one of those together. Then we wrote a couple of Smurfs episodes together. And then it was very clear that I could write these on my own. See, I rose to the top of the ladder in animation very quickly. I wrote for all the major animation companies, many, many shows. And Black Star, Michael and I wrote almost all of those. We wrote for He-Man and the Master of the Universe, wrote for Pole Position. I think Michael and I wrote all of those, wrote for Real Ghostbusters. It was very fun. It was, I was learning my craft. I was learning how to tell a story in a certain number of pages, how to duplicate character voice, hear it in your head and be able to be those characters. I wasn't writing down. I was giving everything my A game. I always do. And, it was fun. It was very fun. And it was a small group of us. We all knew each other and we all hung out together, whether, Buzz Dixon and Paul Dini and, everybody. We all, we were a little group. Candy Montero was our agent. Sounds like a gangster from, Guys and Dolls, but Candy Montero was a woman, and she was the first agent to represent animation writers, and she was a wonderful person. And we would have parties at her home around the pool. And then but I wanted to be writing live action. I wanted to write for things like Star Trek. And so I basically I could earn $100,000 writing for animation in a matter of a few months, which was huge money back then. We're talking about the 1980s and late 70s into the early 80s. And so I knew I had to write a live action movie script to have a writing sample that would get me hired on live action shows. And so I earned enough for the year through animation, then turned down all the animation gigs. And so in 2 days' time, I turned down $200,000 worth of work and wrote the spec feature, which was called Piece of Cake. It was kind of a Romancing the Stone kind of movie, if you remember that, or Indiana Jones. And it sold, and it got me a pilot deal with NBC that got shot. It's Choose Your Own Adventure, which we shot in Thailand with Pat Morita and Soleimon Fry and Chad Allen. And then I got hired to develop Captain Power. So I spent a year developing Captain Power as a live action show. And brought Joe Straczynski aboard, guaranteed Joe Straczynski in his first live action story editing job. And the producers were Doug Netter and John Copeland, who he then ultimately did Babylon 5 with. So therein hangs a tale. But animation, I learned to write very quickly and well. I learned there were 2 kinds of animated shows at that point. And the major companies were Ruby Spears, Deke, Hanna-Barbera, Marvel was just starting up. Wrote for The Incredible Hulk for Marvel, the animated version. There were a few others. Filmation, I wrote for, with Black Star and Masters of the Universe. It was a small group of people. We were all young. We were all in our 20s and early 30s at that point. Very ambitious, all of us. Many of us were also writing books and movie scripts. And it was an amazing time. And the 2 kinds of animation were the funny animal stuff that included Smurfs and Littles and Puppy's Further Adventures and all of that. Biscuits, I wrote for Biscuits. And then there was the superhero stuff that included Super Friends, which I also wrote for, and Black Star and He-Man and Real Ghostbusters, which was kind of a comedy version, but still within the superhero adventure kind of storyline. And you'd be writing for multiple shows simultaneously. You'd be writing just at a frenetic pace. We started on typewriters, and And then computers came in, and we all got K Pro 2s, which was the first computer that you could write on, and you'd have these big 5-inch floppy drives, and it was an amazing time. I'm going to write a book called My Animated Life, not My Animated Life, um, I think it's called My Televised Life, and it's about how I was the first generation of kids who grew up on TV. And Elaine's family didn't have a TV; they had radio. So she grew up with the radio versions of the Lone Ranger and so forth, whereas I grew up with the TV versions. But I was the first generation of TV viewers, and one of my first memories is watching the Mickey Mouse Club, where I'm sitting in a little wicker chair, and I've got my Mickey Mouse hat on, and then I was watching, Highway Patrol and Dragnet and all those shows from Adventures of Superman when I was a kid. And then I grew up to write TV. Well, Star Trek was the turning point when I was 10. That's the show that made me want to be a writer. That and Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, all the original versions of those shows. And so I grew up to write and produce TV. I basically am living the dream, literally, and now I'm embracing the new model of making my own television, having my own channel, and so the book will be about that journey through the entire history of television from my perspective as a viewer, then a creator of content. So it'll be a fun book to write, and let's see what else. So. They're talking about anime. Yes, please. Anyone who wants to enter the spacesuit contest, please do. I would love to start getting spacesuits in the mail. And Ian McCaig has some designs. You can use your own design. There's different categories like steampunk, and we get, you send us a spacesuit and we use it in Space Command. We have a traveling exhibit of spacesuits, and you get to come to the convention. And everyone who makes a spacesuit, every single person who sends a spacesuit to us, gets credited as a spacesuit fabricator in the credits of Space Command. So it's huge. It's terrific. Let's see. Someone says, Hawkins says, I heard the TV industry is brutal. Is it true? No, it's not true. There's too much arrogance. There's too much wasted effort, particularly in features. It's very, very, lots of money is wasted. It's not brutal so much as corrosive, and a lot of talented people get chewed up and spit out, which I guess sounds brutal. But in reality, you have to recognize that what you say no to is more important than what you say yes to. Years ago, I said to Joe Straczynski, and he told me this, had a major influence on him. I said, when you're writing for television, when you start writing for television, you're on the conveyor belt. And the conveyor belt will take you where it wants you to go. And what you have to do is you have to step off the conveyor belt and figure out where you want to go. And that's certainly what Joe did, and certainly what I've done. And, we're all responsible for our own lives, our own fates. You either accept that life is what's thrown at you, or you decide that life is what you make of it, and that you can be an active participant in that life. And you're going to have generally a better life if you take on the latter attitude. And so TV can be brutal, but that's why you surround yourself with good people, and get mentored by good people. And that's why I studied Rod Serling and got to know Matheson and George Clayton Johnson and Harlan and all these amazing, amazing writers, Ted Sturgeon. And then I started mentoring people, and also I got Guillermo del Toro as a co-writer and a mentor. And Ray Bradbury was a phenomenal mentor to me. And so you find the people who are nurturing, and you surround yourself with them, and that helps enormously. That's why I created my roundtable in LA, and that's why I teach and mentor people, because it's it's like putting a plant in fertile soil. It'll thrive if it's given the nutrients it needs, and it won't if it doesn't. So okay, what else? Yes, Smurfs, He-Man, Ghostbusters. For many years, I didn't tell people I wrote animation, and then one day I heard some younger people, adults but young, raving about Smurfs and how much they loved it. And I walked over to them and said, I wrote for Smurfs, and they were, duly impressed. But it came from Outer Smurf. That's one of mine, by the way. And Station Identification on Real Ghostbusters is one of mine. I wrote four Real Ghostbusters episodes. Very fun. Joe Straczynski was the story editor on that. Let's see what else. Thanks for a chunk of childhood. You're very welcome, Yo. As you're talking about animation, I've been working on a piece of my own using iClone. Any tips about producing? Just entertain yourself. Make what you find entertaining and fun. When I was writing animation, someone once asked me, "Are you writing for the child in the audience?" And I said, "No, I'm writing for the child in myself." And that seemed to work. I've always written for myself. I know if I like it, if I'm entertained, the audience generally will like it too. Let's see. Netflix choose is doing choose your own adventure stuff now, Minecraft Adventures and recent Black Mirror. Yeah, I mean, the version of choose your own adventure that I wrote, it was very difficult because we didn't have interactive television back then, and we didn't have a way of the audience choosing different pathways. So we had to kind of work that into this plot of the show, and we did that, but it wasn't. Yeah, we did our best. And let's see. Centurions, Bionic Six, Phantom, 2040, Get Along, Gang, The Littles. These are all shows I've written for. Yeah, Liberty's Kids. We were nominated for the Humanitas Prize for that, Elaine and I. It was fun. I once, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor, I once met him, and I walked up to him and I said, "I wrote for you," because he had played a character on Liberty's Kids. He'd been voice talent, and he said, "Oh, really?" So yeah, pretty hilarious. Let's see. Yeah, this Kip says should be some great suits. I bet. Looking forward to seeing them. Yes, me too. I love spacesuits. I own two. I own two spacesuits. When we did World Enough in Time, we made a copy of the Tholian and Webb spacesuit from Star Trek, and I have that at home. And I also have a real spacesuit, a Navy high altitude suit that my mom bought me when I was 12. It's the one that I wear in my cameo in Space Command, and Western Costume had a sale, and they were selling that spacesuit, and my mom bought it, which tells you what a great mom she was, and certainly tells you that I've always been the same kind of weirdo that I am now. Let's see, what else? Please talk about Friday the 13th series and Lazarus Man. Okay, Friday the 13th. Well, that was my first story editing job. I was never a staff writer. I went in to pitch to Friday the 13th series to Bill Taub, who was executive story editor, and he loved how quick a story mind I had. I would say, well, here's all the different ways you could do it. You could do this way, that way, this way, that way. And he said, I hired you because I wanted those fingers. And so I was on my first story editing job was on Friday the 13th series at Paramount. It was terrific. It was just as Star Trek: The Next Generation was starting out up. It was before it was even on the air. So I'd go to the executive lunchroom restaurant, and the entire cast of Star Trek: The Next Generation would be sitting at a big table in costume, in makeup. Data would have the yellow eyes in. And I remember Jonathan Frakes once got up and he was heading somewhere maybe to use the men's room, and everyone was kind of looking at him. He was an actor. He was kind of preening, and he walked face first into a pillar because he wasn't looking where he was going, which was a great moment, I got to tell you. And I talked to Jonathan recently, and he's another person I very much love to have in Space Command, and we'll see what we can do. And Gates McFadden looks great, and I'd love to have her in the show too. We'll see what we can do. But Friday the 13th was a lot of fun. I got to write a story about my father called Pipe Dream, and Michael Constantine starred as my dad, and looks very much like my dad, which was not my intent. And but I'm very proud of that episode. And what happened with Friday the 13th, the series was a Writers Guild strike came up. So that's why I was only on the first season, because we were out for 6 months. And by the time that the strike was over, Friday the 13th series had learned how to kind of do without us. And that was the end of that. In terms of, let's see, what was the other show you wanted me to talk about? Oh, Lazarus Man. Lazarus Man was a Western that I was a producer on. It was very fun. Elaine and I wrote one of the episodes, and I wrote other episodes. And Anthony Rapp of Star Trek Discovery, I wrote a lead role for him, a guest role that he was terrific in. And I met him recently, and I told him that I wrote for him, and he remembered it, of course. I've posted that entire episode on my Mr. Sci-Fi channel, so you can actually watch that episode, and I'm very proud of it. And Anthony Rapp is someone I'd like to work with again. I don't think he's well used on Star Trek Discovery. I think he seems kind of arch, and I don't know, you really don't warm to most of those characters. Saru is really the only one, and maybe Tilly, but they're using Tilly so much as a comedy relief, and it's a shame. It's like having an orchestra of instruments that you have mistuned. It really feels like that. Okay. let's see, have you dabbled in horror? Any thoughts on the genre? Well, yeah, I story edited Friday the 13th series. I think horror, when it's done well, can be spectacular. The novel, The Haunting of Hill House, is one of the great novels of the macabre, and the movie of it is terrific. The one that Robert Wise directed with Julie Harris, and I haven't watched the series yet. I've heard it's good. Um, I mean, my taste in horror runs to things like I like George Romero's stuff. I like Night of the Living Dead. I like what is it, World War Z. I liked Get Out very much. I didn't tend not to like films that are just like the same cliches over and over. But if it's, I'm not a huge aficionado of horror, but I like good ones. Um, so I'll watch things that are like spooky and creepy and, but again, there's a lot of really bad horror movies. I've never seen the movie Halloween. I've actually just recently Elaine got it for me for Christmas, and I'm going to watch the original Halloween because I love John Carpenter. And then I'll watch the recent one with Jamie Lee Curtis just for the fun of it. And oddly enough, speaking of horror, Elaine, went to college with Freddy Krueger, with Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger. So again, he's someone we probably should bring into Space Command 2 and have a reunion. But he was a big comic actor until Freddy Krueger. So, but I think horror is a terrific genre. It allows a lot of possibility, and I think there'll be great horror stories to come. Lazarus Man was a Western with mystery and horror elements. Yes, it was, and I like to do the weirder ones. I mean, again, there was kind of a split on the writing staff between those who were doing kind of more prosaic kind of Westerns and those of us like Dick Beebe and myself who were trying to do really strange Westerns. And it's very funny. Dick Beebe created the show. And at one point early on, the network execs were asking how it ends, how the show ends. And he said, because the basic plot was it was a Secret Service agent who was there when Lincoln was killed, and it was a whole big plot, and he was buried alive, and when he came out of it, he couldn't remember who he was. And he's wandering around the Lazarus Man because he came back to life. So they asked Dick Beebe, how do you envision the show ending? And he said, oh, I envision the show ending where it's right after Lee Harvey Oswald, Kennedy's assassin, has been shot, and he's being wheeled on a gurney as he's dying. And we discover that the entire show of Lazarus Man has simply been in his mind in those few minutes after he's been shot before he dies. And there was this dead silence in the room. And they said to him, don't ever say any of that again. So that was not going to be the end of the show. Sadly, Robert Urich, our wonderful star, got cancer and died of it. And so that's why we never did a second season of the show. But I really enjoyed working on it, and I'm proud of the work we did. And Armin Shimmerman, Armin was a dear friend. And I had his photo on my corkboard in my office because I wanted to come up with a role for him. But at one point, Dick Beebe came in and looked at the photo and said, Armin Shimmerman, he'd be great for the guest lead in when I'm writing. So they hired Armin for that one. So I got Armin some work. But I've worked with Armin many times. Let's see. Who was your favorite B5? I assume you mean Beatmaster. You mean my favorite B5 actor to write for, and which one as a viewer? There's a lot of great actors in that cast. There's great chemistry. I loved Mira Furlan. Bill Mummy's great fun. I loved the rapport, the chemistry between Jakar and Londo, and they were phenomenal together. Andreas Katsulas and Peter Jurasik, and I wrote a scene between them that in the one I wrote, Survivors, where they were just terrific. And I loved the makeup on Andreas Katsulas. And when I was a producer on Sliders, I took him to lunch, and he was very much an actor I wanted to work with more. And he told me that I was the only producer who had ever taken him to lunch. And Armin Shimmerman told me I was the only producer who ever said he was going to hire him, and did. So sad thing, actors are not respected as they should be. And Andreas Katsulas died way too young. He was an amazing, amazing actor. Because it takes a certain kind of actor to be able to be big enough for science fiction, that kind of operatic quality, but not so over the top that you seem ridiculous or shrill. And he and Peter Jurasik really were able to hit that note. I like Peter Jurasik very much. I'd like to use him in Space Command. I'm really great I'm really thrilled that I got to use Mira Furlan and Bill Mummy, and it was fun for Bruce Boxleitner to come in for a cameo, basically. Um, but Mira Furlan, when I met her, I really wanted to work with her again. And, I really love a lot of the actors on that show, and I'll definitely be using more of them. It's a shame so many of the cast. It's funny that none of the major cast of Star Trek: The Next Generation has died, but so many of the leads on Babylon 5 have. It's really, really unfortunate, and it's just a shame. But the ones who are with us, I think, I mean, there's so many great science fiction actors who are underutilized, and I really want to use them on Space Command and all the other shows. I mean, Rock and I have been talking about all the actors we know for Sweet Haven, the new show we're creating, and I've mentioned that Mike Harney is going to be in it. I want to bring many, many, many actors that I know into it. George Takei, of course. It was wonderful to work with James Hong in the second story of Space Command, and because another great older actor whose work I love. Let's see. Here's the questions. Yeah, Mark Lund was asking about Space Precinct and Forever Night. Space Precinct, I wrote several of those. It was a really strange show, but it was great to work with Jerry Anderson because I'd loved his work ever since I'd seen Supercar and Thunderbirds and Fireball XL5 and Stingray when I was a kid. These great marionette shows, and he used the same technology, the model work. He was very old school, and it was a British show that I was writing for Jerry Anderson. He was elderly at the time, or older. It was not many years before he died, and but it was so strange. The idea was so great. A cop who goes to an alien world, a cop from New York who goes to an alien world, or a cop from Earth at least, with his family to be on an alien planet with aliens, and great idea. Very badly realized on that show. The lead actor was kind of weak, and they were putting their money in all the wrong places. And I wrote three, and after I wrote the first one, they asked me if I wanted to go and be a story editor on the show, and I would have gone to England, but I knew that the show was heading down the tubes, and so I said no. And but I watched one of my episodes recently and thought it was really fun and enjoyed it. And it's very peculiar, but definitely an acquired taste. And um, but it's funny because after that show, after I wrote for that show, I thought, God, that was a wasted idea, because it was such a great idea to have a New York cop um, go to an alien world with different aliens. So Michael Reeves and I created a series. We did the series Bible, and it was optioned many times. Weren't able to sell it. It was called Dante's Station, and it was about a New York cop who is given a choice of going to prison. There's a scandal. There's this big scandal, and he's given the choice of going to prison or going to the roughest place in the solar system, in the galaxy, to be a cop. And he joins the murder squad, the homicide department on this in this mining colony near the center of the galaxy. And it was a very cool idea. And I may return to it. It's a show I'd actually like to do, but we'll see what happens. But it was, it would be very fun to do a show along those lines. It's sort of like got a Blade Runner kind of feeling. And I remember the opening shot that we came up with, or that I came up with, was it's like a murder scene at night. It's an alleyway, and you see a crowd of people there, and you have the spinning police lights on everything, and there's a crowd of people around the body, and our hero, the human cop, pushes through that crowd to get to the body, and it's only as you come upon the body and see the crowd that we realize that the body is an alien and the crowd has aliens in it. And that was so, because it's sort of like the standard NYPD Blue kind of opening or whatever, and then bang, you realize you're not where you think you are. It would have been fun. Let's see. And Forever Night, I wrote one episode of Forever Night, but I wasn't on staff, so I really didn't have power over it. It was, I don't think I've even ever seen the finished episode, but I did write for Forever Night. Sci-fi horror, if done right, is the best kind. I agree, absolutely. I love Alien, and it's funny, they previewed Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien, at the World Science Fiction Convention, and they arranged a screening in a big auditorium, and there was no preview there was no information about what the movie was going to be. So literally, it wasn't like anything any of us had ever seen. And I remember when the chest burster came out of John Hurt's chest, everyone jumped a foot. Harlan Ellison was sitting in front of me, in the row in front of me, and he jumped, and it's like, it was just shocking. It was like when I saw the Night of the Living Dead for the first time. It was that sense of, the rules are changed, the genre is changed. I don't know where we're going, but it's really scary. And I loved Alien. It was so, I still do. It was so different and great. And the first one to really try to marry horror and science fiction was Richard Matheson. He did a great episode of Twilight Zone called Death Ship, and that was about three astronauts who land on an alien planet and find a copy of their own ship crashed, and inside that crashed ship are their own dead bodies, and they have to figure out whether they're dead, whether they're being gaslighted by aliens who are telepathic. They don't know. And it starred Ross Martin and Jack Klugman. It's a terrific episode. I highly recommend it. And but that was Richard Matheson trying to marry horror and science fiction. He wrote it as a short story or novella, I guess, and then translated into one of the Our Twilight Zones. Let's see what else. Yeah, Robert Englund was very fun in V as the comedy relief. Yeah, Ice Pirates is fun too. Babylon 5 was cursed, it seems. You mean in terms of the deaths? Yeah, yeah. But at least Joe got his 5 seasons. He didn't think he was going to get them, so he only thought he was going to get 4. Because each year, Warner's made noises about intending to cancel the show. And so Joe was playing brinksmanship, and he would get the fans to like inundate, Warner's with, save Babylon 5. But then finally on the 4th season, he thought, oh boy, these guys are serious. They're really going to pull the plug this time. So then he sped up his chronology to finish the whole Shadow Wars thing. And then Turner picked up for a 5th season, and it's like, oh man. And that's why he then had to kind of vamp. It's a shame he wasn't able to pace it the way he intended. I think it would have been stronger. But I'm rewatching Babylon 5 now because I haven't seen all the episodes. And it's an amazing show. It really has a lot to recommend it even now. Can't wait for the James Hong episode. Yeah, James Hong is terrific. He was in Blade Runner. He's in Big Trouble in Little China. He's just wonderful. And so I cast him, and he's great in Space Command. You can see the trailer for that episode on the Hour Pilot. I tack on trailers for the remaining 5 hours or 5 more hours of Space Command stories based on what we shot. Mark Lewis says I should really ask about Knife Through the Veil. That's the Twilight Zone episode I wrote that when they brought the show back in the late 80s, I wrote a terrific episode, and the censors pulled the plug on it a week before we were going to shoot. And so you can read it on, I think on my website. I think you can download it if memory serves. It's a really great script. Years later, Katie Sackhoff wanted to star in it. She wanted to do it, and we tried to pull it together as part of an anthological film, but that didn't come to fruition. So I've yet to work with Katie Sackhoff, but she's also on my list of people I want to work with. Yeah, Dante's Station sounds like it would fit in the edgy dark you were talking about earlier. Well, it would be noir. It's future noir, but it's. But I always have hope in everything I write. Nothing is grim. I never end on a hopeless note because I believe in people. I believe in people, and I believe that people will rise to the occasion if given that opportunity, if given someone to model themselves after. I think, you can have a Martin Luther King or you can have an Adolf Hitler. You can follow a dark star or a bright one. And I think humans are mostly in the middle range, and they can give in to fear and terrible things can happen, or they can give in to hope and great things can happen. It's what you believe the future is going to be, the future that's drawing you. And so on Dante's Station, I would still have it be hopeful. I would still have it be positive for all of the darkness of the story. And but we worked out this whole huge story arc. We had 3 different races. Optic Nerve, who did the makeup for Babylon 5, makeup designs, actually designed aliens for us for that project. And sadly, we won't get to see those brought to fruition. Let's see. If that's me lying there, then what am I? Yeah, that's fun. England has that effortless charisma. He does, and I really should make more of an effort to bring him into Space Command. Yeah, and in terms of all these different franchises, they're going to keep rebooting them, and whether it's I think and they'll either be good or they'll be bad. I mean, I liked JJ's Star Trek movie, the first one. I thought it was a really good job. Some people hate it, some people love it. I really thought he pulled it off. But that's my opinion. And I had a long conversation with Stephen First about the high number of B5 cast members dying, but it was clear he would survive and recover. Well, Yeah. Let's see. Wait. Or wait. I'm combining two. Oh yes, I've combined two. Sorry, I had a long conversation with Stephen first about the high number of P5 cast members gone too soon. 2 years later, we lost him. Ken says yes, it's true. And again, he's an actor I would have very much liked to have brought into Space Command. I mean, it's such a shame that we lose these actors that we want to work with. And Stephen First, he's really, I mean, it's very interesting to watch how they, how they play these comic relief characters and then bring them in more deeply. He was really great. He was great to offset Londo's personality. They really are a great duo. So let's see. Pipe Dream ended with a close-up of Ryan crying. It was clear he would survive and recover. That's about Friday the 13th, the series, one of the episodes I wrote. Um, yeah, Katie Sackhoff is in this new film that's on Netflix. I haven't watched it yet, but the trailer makes it look kind of low budget, and I mean, the real um, the answer to all this stuff is that actors have a hard career. If they can maintain an ongoing career with great roles, that's rare. It takes choosing the right projects. It takes knowing the right people. It takes a million things. And most actors, they have one great role, and then they kind of fade away. And maybe they're on some other shows, but they're usually not shows that are as distinctive, as memorable. But that's why I'm using all these actors in new roles that give them something to work on, or something to work with. The moment I met Doug Jones, I said, he had this amazing face and this incredible sensitivity. I said, well, I'm going to write a role for you, and we're going to get to see your face, and that's what we do. And it's a role unlike anything he's ever done. Been rereading some of H.G. Wells' short stories like The Land Ironclad. So many ideas we take for granted now. It's true. Land Ironclad's predicted tanks, and but The War of the Worlds is a phenomenal book. The Time Machine is a great, great book. I like George Powell's version of it with Rod Taylor, but they've never really done the book as fully as they could have. And it's a phenomenal piece of work. I'd love to see someone adapt it well. Let's see what else here. James Callis, I thought, was a great actor, but he never became a well-known name. It's sad. It's true. So many of these actors in science fiction, particularly, are great. But the lovely thing, what's allowing me to do Space Command, allowing me to have these adventures, is the fact that these science fiction actors go to conventions and sign photos themselves. See, it used to be that actors were supposed to, you'd write them for a photo, and then they'd send you a signed photo, and they had to pay for it out of their own pocket, including the postage. And you'd either get a copy of their signature, or it'd be really signed by them, or it'd be signed by a secretary pretending to be them. Like, for instance, a lot of the signed things from Gene Roddenberry were actually his assistant signing letters for him. But then someone got the brilliant idea of charging for actors' signed photos and having them appear at conventions where they could earn some money, because most actors are not rich. Most actors, even if they were a lead on a show that you loved 20 or 30 years ago, they may be struggling now. I remember I was with Rene Auberjonois at one point at his house, and he said, "This is the house that whatever show it was, the Butler thing." He said that show is what bought him his house in Deep Space Nine, is what saved his house, because being on that second show allowed him to make his mortgage. And Benson was the show. And so signing, but the thing is, the signing photos allows these actors to be at conventions. It allows me to meet them at the conventions, and then I can say to them, "Hey, you want to be in the World Enough Time? You want to be in Space Command?" And they say yes, and it's not insanely expensive, because they want to do good work. They want to have roles that are memorable, and that allows me to bring more people in. I'm this upcoming year, I'm going to be shooting a lot more of Space Command and other projects. And so if anyone wants to help, if you want to be part of the crew, part of making stuff, building stuff, holding a boom, just, reach out to me, markzickery@gmail.com. I'm happy to have more helpers. But the money's going to be tight, as you know. So until we sell the show, but maybe next Tuesday we'll change that. Let's see, what is this? Low budget makes you creative. At least that's the white lie I always tell myself as an indie. Low budget makes you resourceful. The challenge is to find the way to make it really sing. The writing is what matters. I mean, ultimately, a lot of people talk about Babylon 5, where it's like, okay, it's a story, they get engaged in the characters, the sets and the costumes may be a little more threadbare than, Star Trek: The Next Generation, which was being done for twice the money. But if you're engaged in the story, you don't mind the weaknesses. It's funny because people nowadays talk about how bad the VFX on the original Star Trek were. Well, that's not true. They were cutting edge for their time. No TV show had ever had effects of that quality. They were phenomenal. They were breathtaking. And remember also, television sets were like 12 inches. They were little. They didn't have 60-inch screens. They didn't have, you couldn't stop a show. You watched them, they ran for an hour, and then they were gone. I recorded the original Star Trek on reel-to-reel audio tape when I was 10, just in case the show never was aired again, just so I could revisit those stories. And, it was a different world. It was a different world. And those visual effects, 2001 changed things and Star Trek changed things. Those were the real high watermarks of visual effects of the late 60s. So let's see what else. The best series anyone could do as far as science fiction goes is another anthology series that would take the unmade SF short stories that are sadly forgotten. I agree. I absolutely agree. There's so many wonderful writers that are no longer remembered. Clifford Simak and Philip K. Dick has had sort of a renaissance, but Ted Sturgeon is largely unknown now. And even people are even forgetting who Ray Bradbury was, and that's tragic because he is one of the great writers of the 20th century. And and Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. It's a different world now, and the way we were exposed to things. Ray Bradbury and Heinlein both were brilliant in the fact that they were smart enough to get their books into the libraries, the elementary school libraries, the high school libraries, and onto the curriculum, so that teachers were assigning Ray Bradbury's work, Fahrenheit 451, and in all the school libraries there were these Heinlein juveniles. Have Space Will Travel, which is a great book, and Citizen of the Galaxy and Spaceship, Rocket Ship Galileo, and Heinlein wrote, I think 11 of them, 11 or 12, I think it was 11. And then Podkayne of Mars and Starship Troopers were going to be two more of them, but Starship Troopers was rejected, and so then he published it as an adult novel. But the juveniles are wonderfully written, very entertaining, and that put him on the map. But now all of those books have been, discarded by the library, so you can find them on eBay, which is what I've been doing. I've been buying all these things up, and and Ray Bradbury is still part of the curriculum. Fahrenheit 5 is still read. Fahrenheit 451. Martian Chronicles is less well known, but I highly recommend it. It's a great, great, great book. Well, truly brilliant. And but that's the problem. Recently when Stan and Ollie came out, the new movie. I was talking to some of my young friends, and I have young friends, which is cool. I don't want to hang out with old people, but that's not true. My friends are all across the board in terms of their ages, from their 70s to 20s. But I was mentioning Stan and Ollie to some young people, and they'd never heard of Laurel and Hardy, and I was stunned because I thought that was just everyone knew who Laurel and Hardy were. But the reason is because back when I was growing up, they were on TV, they were in syndication, and now there's 1,000 channels, a million channels, whatever. And so you're not going to stumble upon them. You're not going to find them. You have to search them out, and that's why they're no longer known. And it's tragic because they were brilliant. But one of the things you have to get used to is that you cannot dictate what will last, what will be remembered. All you can do is do your best work and hope that something lasts. I'm enormously gratified that The Twilight Zone Companion is still in print after all these years. It came out in 1982. How many years ago is that? 40, what is it? It's like over 30 years, heading on toward 40. I guess it'll be, a few more years before it's 40 years, but I'm incredibly proud of that book. And I just came out with a new edition just a few months ago. You can buy it on Amazon and I'll get $1 for a copy, and we're talking to Titan Books about publishing a hardcover, because the only hardcover edition that ever came out was when the Science Fiction Book Club put out an edition in '82, and those copies now go for between $1,000 and $3,000 on eBay. And I actually sold my copy signed by a lot of people to a friend of mine for $5,000. He had the money, and I put that money into Space Command. So, but I'm gratified. Let's see what else. Will there be difficulty holding on to Space Command actors who get cast in other shows or movies? It's a good question, and the answer I think is no. And here's the reason. At least right now, my studio is in Los Angeles. That's deliberate because most shows are shot elsewhere. So if an actor is living in LA and he has to go for 8 months to Toronto or Vancouver or New Orleans or Croatia to shoot a show, they want to come home and they want to be with their families. With Space Command, I can say to Doug Jones or Bob Picardo or whomever, look, we aren't paying as well as a major network show, but you get to sleep in your own bed, you get to be with your family. It's just we pick you up, we drive you to the set, you're here for a couple days, and then we can, and you're done. And so they really like that. And also, because I'm writing the entire season and there's bits and pieces, we can say, okay, Doug, when are you in town? Let's shoot 3 or 4 days while you're in town. And that could be in several episodes, and we'll just figure it out. And if someone's not available or chooses not to come back, then there's a lot of other actors we want to work with. So, you can basically make it work. And on the other hand, if Netflix says, well, we want you to shoot it in London, or we want you to shoot it in Canada, I mean, you roll with the punches. But I'm not gonna make Space Command something loathsome or less than I've got now, because I can, so far so good. And but the actors who are coming, the ones we're going to be having in Space Command, I mean, it's just going to be amazing. Armin Shimmerman and Ethan Phillips and J.G. Hertzler and Gigi Edgley, and a friend of mine just told me that he knows Barbara Bain, and I'm absolutely going to reach out to Barbara Bain. I would love to have Barbara Bain in Space Command. She was in Space 1999 and Mission Impossible, and wonderful, wonderful. So, and I heard she's still got her acting chops. She's still terrific. So, cannot wait. Let's see what else. In reference to Clayton's statement, there was a British series in the 60s called Out of the Unknown. It was the only adaptation of stories by major SF authors like Clark and Asimov. Look for it. Hey, that's great. Out of the Unknown. I'll look for it too. That sounds cool. Let's see. You only need 3 things to make a movie: a story, some friends, and some toys. That's true. Now you just need a couple of phones and a YouTube channel. Rockney O'Bannon and I have actually been talking about shooting Sweet Haven, the show we're creating, with iPhone, X's or 10s or whatever they're called. I mean, it's just such a cool idea of being light on your feet and being able to shoot something sort of cinema verite. We'll see. We may or may not do that, but it was just so fun to talk about it. Let's see. Ray Bradbury Theater. Ray was such a dear friend. I think Ray Bradbury Theater was like, it was okay. It wasn't Twilight Zone. And it's a shame that Ray and Rod Serling had their falling out. And I talk about that on Mr. Sci-Fi. But the EC Comics adaptations of Ray's work were stupendous, were just terrific. I wish someone would publish a volume, like a big hardcover volume of just the Ray Bradbury adaptations in EC, because I think that would be just dazzling. Laurel and Hardy biopic with Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly. I highly recommend it, yes. It was so sad that Callista Flockhart didn't continue her role in Supergirl because she preferred to work and reside only in LA. Well, yeah, I mean, every actor has to make that decision whether they're going to shoot out of town. And most of them make that decision that they will, because that's where the work is, Again, when I was coming up in the business, there were a lot more shows shooting in LA, and a lot more shows were shooting on the back lot, which I love doing. I love to be on the back lot. Any knowledge on the new Battlestar Galactica reboot? No, I don't know anything about it, but it'll be good, bad, or indifferent. It's we'll find out, won't we? First season, Space 1999. It's like no other SF series ever made. That's true. And it's definitely, again, an acquired taste, and some people are going to like it and some people will not. But I love Barbara Bain and Martin Landau. And I got to meet Martin Landau a few times because he was in the Twilight Zone. And so there were Museum of Broadcasting retrospectives that he was on the panel, as was I. Really a nice guy. Really, really terrific and great as Bela Lugosi. Second season of Space 99 was a real step down in quality from season 1. That often happens. And no Barry Morse. Fred Freiberger. Yeah, he would definitely be of harm to shows. DC Comics still owns all the AC stuff, I think. I'm not sure. It's possible. But it's so fun to have all of these influences. It's all, like when I was writing the book with Guillermo del Toro and hanging out in Bleak House, it was just wonderful to realize what a rich stew, pop culture stew, those of us who are into the genre have at our fingertips. And the trick is always to come up with something that says something meaningful about life, but can riff on all these wonderful touchstones, these visuals and audio treats, and say, oh, okay, that's like, for instance, when the Paladin takes off, that's, when worlds collide, okay, and also Fireball XL5, and yet I'm not just, going over old ground. I'm coming up with a story that's new and trying to find ways of commenting on our world. And so, but I love when I can give a tip of the hat. Like, for instance, I named all the crew members on the Paladin and the Templar, the two sister ships in Space Command. I named all the characters after science fiction writers. So you've got Sturgeon, and you've got Le Guin, and you've got Simak, and you've got Lieutenant Bradbury, and even Captain Kemmer is named after Ed Kemmer, who starred in Space Patrol, which was one of the great science fiction shows of the 1950s, one of my favorite shows. Unfortunately, I got to meet him, and he was a great guy and a real World War II hero. He was shot out of his P-51 Mustang and captured by the Germans and escaped from them, and on, an amazing man. So let's see, they should make a Bill Gaines Award. Yes, I agree. Well, the funny thing is, I was a judge at the Cardiff International Film Festival. They gave me a Life Achievement Award, and they were saying, well, would you like to come back next year? And I said, yes, but I'd like to curate like a 2-day science fiction film festival and have panels and screenings and all sorts of stuff. And they said, great, that sounds terrific. So we're now in the talking phase of that, and I would invite novelists like Peter Hamilton and just Stephen Baxter, those kind of guys, and also the TV guys like Ron Moore, etc., and the Doctor Who guys like Brian Minchin, who's now doing the Time Traveler's Wife for HBO and a Dracula series for Amazon. They haven't come out yet, but and Stephen Moffat would be great for that panel. But one of the things they've talked to me about is maybe having a Mr. Sci-Fi award, and maybe that would be the Paladin. But it's a cool idea. I'd love to do it. I love getting awards, and I wouldn't mind giving them either. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. Used to call Freiberg the show killer, final producer for Trek, Space, and Gunsmoke. Yeah, he was the guy who finally killed Marshall Dillon. That's funny. Jerry Anderson was an amazing man. I loved those animation, the marionette shows that he did. They were just great. Super Marionation. Just saw Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 1. Doug Jones was amazing. Yeah, I mean, Doug is the one actor on that show who's really able to present. At first he just seemed like he was just doing Odo. He was kind of arch. But as it evolved, he was able to create a compassionate, intelligent, and interesting character. And he has to walk on his tippy toes in the wide shots, which isn't too comfortable. But other than that, it's he really is my favorite character, I think, on that show. I think Tig Notaro is going to be great too. I really loved what she did in the episode that I watched last night, and she's an amazing stand-up comic. Let's see. Clayton George says, when I first heard about Space Command, I was hoping for a surreal cross between Wally Wood's art and the radio show Dimension X. Some of these radio episodes were wondrous, and I'm still in awe. Well, that's sort of what I'm intending. Wally Wood is definitely a huge influence, and Dimension X is again, between Dimension X and X-1. Those were the two great American radio shows of science fiction. I mean, they were adapting adapting stories from Astounding Science Fiction and Galaxy magazine and doing them accurately. And they were adapting stories by Robert Sheckley, Clifford Simak, Ray Bradbury, brilliant adaptations of Ray Bradbury, on and on. It's a great show. And so this is very much part of the DNA of Space Command. There's no doubt about that. And let's see. The Showrunners Network is very exciting. Yeah, I think so too. I sat down and I generated about 400 ideas for shows, and then I show them to my collaborators, and we see what sparks, or they might have something that I like, But it's it's going to be a fun project. In terms of Doug Jones having range, emotionally and physically, I agree. He's I can't say enough good things about him. He's terrific to work with, really wonderful. Talking about Wales, The Prisoner was made in Wales, and also recent Doctor Who. Though recently they've moved Doctor Who from Wales to Yorkshire, sadly. But I want to shoot in Wales. I'm actually thinking of shooting some of Space Command in Wales, because if I'm the judge of that film festival, the largest Star Trek convention in Europe happens at the same time or a little after. And I'm thinking of shooting some of Great Solar War, the Space Command story, in Wales, and reaching out to the actors who are going to be at that convention and having them shoot in Wales with us. They've got sound stages. They've got amazing set builders. I think it'd be great fun. And our partners on the Lord Peter Hayne project that we're producing and Elaine's writing are in Wales. So we are dealing with Welsh people a lot. There's also a terrific town right near there called Hay-on-Wye. And it's a town entirely of bookstores, or largely of bookstores, antiquarian and used bookstores, just phenomenal stuff, great stuff. So let me see here. Let's see, we're going to wrap it up in the next couple minutes. Elaine's showing me a note from David Rakelin. Yeah, I did that. We're cool. Elaine's giving me the thumbs up. Hi, Elaine. Elaine is doing her Marcel routine. And so she's not talking. But we'll wrap this up in the next few minutes. Let's see what else here. Let's see. Weren't to mention X and X minus one, basically the same show. Not exactly. They were very similar. One of them was, I think, entirely stories from Astounding, and the other was Astounding, but then it was Galaxy science fiction. And Astounding and Galaxy had a very different aesthetic and different writers often. So Astounding was much more kind of hard science fiction, and Galaxy was more, it had a little more humor, a little more whimsicality to it. So Robert Sheckley was writing for Galaxy. Ted Sturgeon was writing for Galaxy, though he'd also written for Astounding. Heinlein was much more the kind of Astounding writer, and so forth. Ray Bradbury, he might have every now and then appear in Galaxy, but he was mainly writing for what were called the slicks, like Collier's and Saturday Evening Post. Full Set of Dimension X on CD, and I treasure them. Yeah, me too. I love those shows. I listen to them often. Did you ever watch? Rampant Patrouille Orion. It's the German science fiction show. It is so strange. I was actually approached to adapt that into an American series about maybe 20 years ago. It was Eric, what's his name? The guy who directed Independence Day. He was going to make that show, and I was approached to adapt it, and nothing came of that. But I actually worked up a pitch, but they sent me a VHS cassette of that show, and it was so odd. They had a scene where they were dancing, and it was like, what on earth is this? I liked it, but it was extremely strange. And but you can see them on YouTube. YouTube is such a great repository for old shows. I mean, a lot of shows from the 1950s, a lot of rarities. You can find them on YouTube. I think it's just great. I love YouTube. And here we are on YouTube. Let's see. Picardo, both on Space Command and the Orville. Yes. I loved, I wrote that monologue for Bob in Space Command, and I didn't know if it was going to work until he performed it, and he's spectacular. I'm so eager to have him back, and we are going to have him back. We're writing further stuff for him that's going to be really, really neat. And I want to cast more genre actors, more science fiction actors. So if you guys have suggestions, if you want to reach out to me later, marksicrete@gmail.com or whatever with your suggestions, I'm very open to that, because I'll reach out to people and bring them aboard. Let's see, Roland Emmerich. Yes, that's right. That's the guy who I came up with that thing for Orion. I love used bookstores. Bunyan Snipe is mentioning old bookstores. I just can't get enough of them. When I went to Hay-on-Wye recently, I just came home with bags and bags of great science fiction paperbacks and from the 50s and 60s. Just love all that stuff. And I love book covers. There's a great artist named Ed Emschwiller, and I love his work. I'm in touch with his son Stoney, and we're using some of his designs in Space Command. And there were many great cover artists back then, and I'm just a huge fan of those guys. Let's see. Any update on Filming Forgiveness? We just have to raise the money, and then it'll cost a couple $100,000 to shoot the rest of it. And so we're going to launch a Kickstarter campaign. If anyone wants to buy shares in Space Command, it goes to finishing the first one and shooting the second one. And we have the design of the alien hibernation ship. We've got a phenomenal production designer from The Matrix and the Star Wars films, and a great creature designer from Star Trek Beyond, who's designed an amazing alien. I mean, it's just, I cannot wait. And Christina Moses, I've been talking to her about playing one of the lead roles. She's been doing a million little things on ABC, and she's available, on hiatus. And I want to hire her, but just need to pull the trigger, and money is what allows me to pull the trigger. So spread the word, guys. And let's see. And in terms of the pitch for Orion, I may come across at some point in my files, and if so, I'll post it somewhere. Do something with it. YouTube purge is literally erasing our history. I don't know about the YouTube purge, so maybe I need to be informed about it. Yeah, it's like the Orville is a very interesting show. I'm going to catch up with it. I haven't been watching it for a while, but I'm going to watch the season premiere and all that stuff. You'd love to see Picardo doing Larry Niven's The Cold Equations. Yeah, it's an amazing story. It's a phenomenal story. They did it on the radio on X-1, I think, or Dimension X, and it's harrowing. So we've gone into our second hour. So I think Timothy Hutton, interesting choice. I think I'm going to call it a night because it is late here in England. But you guys have been great, and please keep in touch. I'm going to post about Star Trek Discovery season opener, and we'll talk again real soon. And thanks, guys. I've had a lot of fun, and we'll talk again next time. Bye.